presentation review initial proposal, and if I could have staff at the end of the table. Thanks, John. And I have the foreshadowed motion from James Goff, and I have an amendment from Mike Davidson. So I feel that just for the interests of getting all the issues on the table, we should just acknowledge what they are so that councillors can ask questions about any of them and can debate questions about any of them. So essentially Mike's amendment, and that has been seconded. That's been moved and seconded. So the amendment is, have you got the amendment there, Mike's amendment?
Speak up.
Sorry.
Say that again, Joe.
It's not moved or seconded until we're actually in debate.
Oh, okay. So we'll get. Sorry, and I had the foreshadowed motion as well. So the amendment is to not approve the recommended initial proposal and request staff develop a new initial proposal that the city is divided into 6 wards as per the currently proposed community board areas, with the population of each ward electing 3 members, apart from Banks Peninsula, who will elect 1 member. So essentially, it's saying that the councillors would be elected at large, as opposed to in the individual, within the community board areas. Yeah, the mayor remains elected at large. So that's the amendment, which we will vote on first, and then the well, actually, is it an amendment or is it a foreshadowed motion now, the way it's written? Oh, well, I'll take some advice on that. It may be another foreshadowed motion. And the other one is to... The original wording was an amendment. I don't know.
Put your mic on. Ian, just put your mic on.
Eh?
This was an attachment to the report, and the second, if this is an amendment, you probably need to say the new attachment 1.
Approves the new attachment.
Right.
It can't say does not approve the recommendation.
But
Right.
it depends if it was going to be a foreshadowed amendment. You're amending the existing resolution.
Yeah. Can somebody play around with the wording? Essentially, it was the way I had it explained to me originally as an amendment was an amendment, and I indicated that it would be accepted as an amendment on advice. The second one is the foreshadowed motion, which is the agreement in principle to to set the number of elected members as 1 mayor, 8 councillors and 20 community board members, requesting staff to make necessary arrangements to consult on attachment 1, noting that indicative boundaries have been identified by the dark green lines on attachment 1. The mayor remains elected at large. The proposal consists of 4 wards. Each of the 4 wards is established as a community board. 2 councillors and 5 community board members will be elected by the electors of each ward. The 2 councillors elected per ward are appointed as members of the respective community board. There will be no central ward. There is no specific Banks Peninsula. Can we spell that correctly? That would be really nice. Or identification as an isolated community, and each ward is within a 10% plus or minus population variance, and that's been established for the draft that's been attached, has it? That they're... Eh? No, this is a foreshadowed motion.
So Mike's will be converted to an amendment, which will be put first. A foreshadowed motion is put after the substantive motion.
Only if it's lost.
If it fails, right.
Only if it's lost, yeah. So, but they're essentially the 2
Alternatives.
the 2 other elements that we're being asked to consider today, but the primary approach is to consider the the amendment, the Davidson amendment, we'll call it,
Yeah.
followed by the substantive resolution, whatever that is, whether that's accepted or not, and then if the substantive motion is lost, then the foreshadowed motion comes to the fore. All right, so I'll open it up for a presentation. Perhaps if staff could just run through the legal process. Sometimes it's actually quite useful to remind people that we're in a process, and if you could describe where we are and the legal, the steps that we're taking in order to comply with our obligations under the Local Electoral Act. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Leanne. We are here asking Council to resolve to accept an initial proposal. Should Council accept this, the proposal will be consulted on for 8 weeks. Full community consultation at a citywide level and a board level. After that, there will be a submissions hearings process. All of Council will be on the hearings panel. 2 days have been convened for this because we do anticipate a lot of community feedback. Following this, a final proposal will be drawn up and presented to Council for adoption. There is a right for the community to appeal against anything in the final proposal. It is likely that the final proposal will cover the fact that Banks Peninsula is a separate ward with considerably less population, 62% less than the average, so the proposal will have to be considered by the Local Government Commission, who will come up with a final determination. So we are at the very beginning of the process, seeking approval for an initial proposal, and there is a substantial journey ahead of us.
Good. Okay.
If I could just cover how we got to this point. We had an initial conversation with Council around about July last year. We engaged Council over 2 related but not intimately connected matters. Firstly, the electoral system, and secondly, the question of whether to create a Māori ward. That happened over August and September last year. Kicking off on the 3rd of November, we undertook a total of 15 workshops with councillors and community boards. Councillors were invited to all of the community board workshops. Those workshops iteratively worked up the initial proposal that is being presented to you. At each stage of the process, different elements of that proposal were discussed and we got sign-off to proceed. We were asked to deliver, and did deliver, on the 23rd of February, a final wrap-up workshop for councillors, summarising and presenting all of the elements of the initial proposal and seeking a level of comfort to develop the proposal, draft the council report and take it to this meeting on the 11th of March. And this is where we are.
Good. Well, look, just to get things on the table, I'm going to move pro forma the initial proposal as per the recommendations in front of us in the paper, and Andrew's going to second that. So we'll now open it up for questions, and as I said, we can ask questions about the foreshadowed motion as well as the amendment as well. So James, Aaron, Jake.
My question is just one around statutory timeframes. I'm just a bit unclear, so can you help me? Is there a statutory deadline around when the public notice is, and also is there any statutory deadline, or basically when does the final proposal have to be done? So is there time to make changes if there was a will to do so?
The public notice has to be given 14 days after the council decision, And the statutory time frame, I think, is the 9th of September that the council must have to have given its public notice. I might be wrong there, it might be the 8th of September.
So that's actually a long time, though.
It is a long
Yeah.
time. The Local Government
But it will
Commission
go
certainly
fast.
encouraged councils
Okay.
to.
I had thought that I'd actually seen that date earlier and it was stuck in my mind, but I wasn't sure if that was correct, so thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Aaron?
So, depending on how the vote goes today, John, is it possible, rather than going out to consult on one option, which is just, do you want to just keep it the way it is, and this is what we're working with, can we go out with the two options, because one's quite radically different, and if not, why not?
No, the statute provides for the council to resolve an initial option. It has to be an option, it's one. So we cannot go out with two options. This came up as a question through the Office of the CEO and at a couple of briefings, and we've been reasonably consistent with that advice.
So then some members of the public that might be slightly more cynical would say, why bother going out?
They'd probably have to talk with the government on the legislation. We're following the statutory process. We do not have any leeway in this.
Those same cynical people probably have a long list of questions for the government.
Probably do, yes. Yes, Councillor Keoghan, yeah.
But it comes back to the council after it comes back as we meet as a hearings panel.
Yes.
And form a recommendation from
Yep.
there. And
Yep.
the last time we did this, we
Yep.
made quite a substantial change.
Yes, we did. Yep.
Which, as
Yep.
I recall, involved the Akaroa Banks
Yep.
Peninsula debate as a significant focus.
Yep.
Jake?
Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work you've put in over many months. From your early pre-engagement that you did in the survey that you had 900 and something responses to, what was the preference split for single-member wards versus multi-member wards?
We'll just look in the...
I can't remember the exact numbers, John, but it was a strong preference for single member. There was only about 3%
we're looking up the details. There was a strong preference for single-member wards.
Thank you. I'll just follow on from that then. So I was approached by several people who had participated in the survey and were concerned that we would be looking to increase the number of councillors, and their impression was the wording multi-member wards was designed to put more members in each ward that already existed. Can you see how the confusion could come about in that wording? In the survey?
We've only received that feedback from one party, and that's through yourself, Councillor Templeton.
But we don't know what
surveys
people
can
don't
always
know.
be a bit ambiguous, but we would certainly take that on board as feedback. It certainly wasn't feedback that was communicated by anyone else.
Because you wouldn't know if you didn't know.
No.
Is the whole
no.
point, but it was ambiguous.
Yep.
Thanks.
I've got Andrew and Jimmy and Mike.
Referring to paragraph 3 in the report, the council must provide for effective representation of communities of interest. There is a possibility today that the foreshadowed motion might be the thing that carries that we end up asking you to prepare a report to bring back for approval. Would you expect to be able to provide advice that the content of the foreshadowed motion provides for effective representation of communities of interest, given that one of the proposed wards goes all the way from the Akaroa Heads to Cathedral Square?
Councillor Turner, our advice would be that council reject the initial proposal and us go away and do this work. So it's very difficult to contemplate providing accurate advice on that.
I mean, people are going to ask questions that are really just surrounding the issue. So we'll steer clear of that and focus our attention. We'll save that for debate, as would be said in a parliamentary environment. So I've got Anne.
Thank you. Just a question about Mike's amendment, is it now? Yes. Just wondering so what he's suggesting here is that the community board areas now become wards. Is that I'm correct? And so there is a potential, is there a potential for, within this system, that there could be 3 elected members from, well, in our situation, Hornby, that represent Hallsville, Riccarton and Hornby. So 3 of the elected members could come from the same suburb, is that correct?
Yes,
Right.
yes it is.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify. So what you're saying is that if we rejected the recommendation that we've moved and moved to the foreshadowed motion, that you would be in a position to report back to investigate that and report back to council with an initial proposal that was capable of going out for consultation.
So are we talking about the Councillor Davidson's amendment,
No.
or are we talking about the foreshadowed motion?
No, the foreshadowed motion. In both instances, both of them would require you to go back and do work and report back. I can see that the foreshadowed motion is considerably more work, but you are capable of delivering that if required.
Delivering advice.
So
Excuse us.
Delivering advice.
Delivering advice to us.
Doesn't agree, it's just
Yep. We would have to go away and we would have to consider whether we had sufficient information to develop a proposal. If we didn't, we would have to have more workshops, possibly more pre-engagement to get that information. So it may take longer.
It certainly will take longer, but you are capable of putting that advice together for us, even though that one will take longer, but within the statutory timeframes.
Yes.
Yes, good. I just wanted to clarify that. Jimmy.
First one, regarding on page 188, those criteria plus or minus 10%. I'm not sure, for instance, like Riccarton, a moment is a 10% plus already, but this one will be, still in process until even, we approve, next year, now consultation or next year take effect in October, but still go on for the at least possibly 6 years. We'll review again.
Yeah.
Possibly, just example, Riccarton new subdivision, this kind of already plus over the 10%, even 15% is still possible. How to mitigate those effects?
Yeah, Councillor Chen, firstly, we've done our best in our modelling to understand the growth areas of the city, the areas that are likely to increase. Secondly, we have at local representatives' request added an area to Riccarton, so it is full. No, it's not. We're not capable of looking through a crystal ball. But we're reasonably comfortable with where we are, bearing in mind that this will go out for public consultation. If you'd just like to pause 1 second, I'll see if there's any more detail that might be relevant to that answer. The projections that we've provided are at June 2020, so they are the newest and the most current information available.
Okay, thank you. Second question, I'd like to follow Jack, the question you replied to Jack earlier. I just want to know, you engaged with those, before you mentioned 1,600 community or key residents. But regarding the enlarge, councillor, enlarge the area, or it's a single council, single ward, have one councillor. What is there the view? Your informal consultation.
Just saying that is the same answer or similar answer we answered before. There was a very small number that suggested larger wards. So you estimated where?
It was 3% in the
3%.
survey. So 48% said that they wanted the status quo. 8% said at large across the whole city. 41% said by a mix of both wards and at large, and then 3% said multi-member wards.
So majority is a single ward, councillor. Okay, thank you.
3%.
I've got, did I miss you, Anne? No. No, okay, you're back in the round. Okay, Mike, Sarah and Anne.
Sorry, my question relates to that, and it's just to correct something you just said, John. The majority of people did not actually, or respondents did not actually support status quo of a single councillor ward.
So we're just confirming that.
They did.
Yeah. And also it is very unclear about the multi-member wards, and that question was actually added in a bit later as well.
It was. So the 3 that were in there are the 3 that are in the legislation around how we can elect members. So we kept it very clear that those are the 3 options. We didn't have it in there because it wasn't something that.
No, that's fine. And in hindsight, we could have made that clearer that it was.
If we had it there initially.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. Just popping back to something that Anne checked on before. Under the current system with single council wards, are councillors, do they have to be from the ward that they're currently elected to? And do we have councillors around the table who were elected from outside? That's a matter of public record because you have to state it on your thing.
Yes.
Yeah, but we do. We have councillors
that's not
currently.
You can look it up yourself.
The
Is
legislation.
there provision for rhetorical questions? I mean, this is getting a wee bit ridiculous.
No.
Well, that was
the first
one just there.
question was
Thanks.
utterly in
Well,
order.
this
I
makes it
was
3 then,
intervening at the time, and I don't need assistance. Thank you.
So the guidance that the Local Government Commission gives for the representation review for this year, for 2021, which I just came across the other day, and we hadn't kind of gone through as a council. One of the things it looks at for when we're looking at boundaries for wards, subdivisions, those kind of things, is that supports communities of interest, all of those kind of things, which we've had a lot of amazing information on. It's been really, really good. Seeing those heat maps has been incredibly useful, really, really good.
Context.
But actually the other thing that it addresses is the encouragement of participation, such as voting or standing as a candidate. And I'm just wondering in what way the potential for these things to be used to encourage participation, such as standing as a candidate, has been taken into account or been raised with us during the process.
No, on the 3rd of November, the project team spoke with council and outlined a proposal for how this process would run. We got the feedback on how it would run, and we decided the feedback we got was not to do a super comprehensive process going back to basics. We agreed with what we were going to do, and we followed. Spending a lot of time considering the matters that you've raised, Councillor Templeton, wasn't raised, and we haven't spent a lot of time investigating that or reporting back.
Yeah, it's just that while we gave our feedback on what the proposed process was, we didn't have an understanding as a council of what the guidelines were asking for us to do from the Local Government Commission. I've just come across that. I'm just saying, so we haven't been able to take into account during this process encouraging participation such as voting or standing as a candidate, because that's not what we chose to do as a process.
But you raise a point. The only thing I could say that at all times we've asked for any questions or any suggestions, items of interest to be sent through to the Office of the Chief Executive. Again, that hasn't been sent through as a concern or a factor to this day.
I think that it's a set of guidelines.
Point accepted.
The council has just said that she wasn't aware of them at the time. She's become aware of them, and she's perfectly entitled to raise them by way of a question, and your answer is that element hasn't been taken into account, because
That's
it
right.
will be relevant to one of the issues that we will debate today. Now I've got Anne and then Jake.
Thank you. So just clarifying that, did you say, Amy, since the 3rd of November we've had 15 workshops
Yes.
for councillors?
No, there have been 5 workshops that have been exclusively for councillors. There have been 10 workshops for community board members, the including councillors, except for one on the 12th of February that was limited to community board chairs and deputy chairs.
So that was the opportunity for councillors to ask questions, to clarify things about the information that was given. That's what the point of the workshop was.
Councillors and community board members in different forums and different settings, some centrally, some citywide, some in here and some locally, just with the community board themselves.
So it would be, so what we're being presented with today in terms of your recommendations is a result of those workshops and the feedback that you got from councillors?
Yes, there's, as I said in the last summing up workshop on the 23rd, there's probably one element of feedback, the Pier Street Triangle we call it, that we really weren't able at this stage to accommodate, and council's direction was let's have a look at that with all the other potential changes through the hearings process.
Thank you.
A couple more that I've just thought of. Is it possible that if you were to go away and work on either the amendment or the foreshadowed motion, that when you come back that the advice might very well say this is undesirable, we don't think this would fly with the local government commission, you know, perhaps, for example, grouping too many different communities into one big ward?
I understand the amendment and the foreshadowed motion requires us to come back with a initial proposal, and that's what we do.
And a rationale.
And a rationale behind it.
Yeah.
Right. And my other question is, in terms of the survey you sent out and the results you got back, was there any hint of pro forma or like-for-like type answers in that?
Nope. So that sample was randomly selected off our research panel, and it was done geographically. So it was representative for each ward. It was very randomly selected, and there was no option for people to forward it on and have other people complete it. So it was managed pretty tightly.
Perfectly. Perfect. Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, just a quick one on, so 2E, the resolution, which says use of gifted te reo Māori names for community boards recognises the gifts, the relationships, and formalises the use of the names. Just so I'm really clear, that'll still be, like for our one, Waimero, or depending on how the resolutions go today, Waimero, Fendleton, Wainari, Herwood?
Yes.
Yeah, so that it wouldn't just be Waimero, would it?
No.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yanni?
So just to be clear, when was the initial proposal's final boundaries presented to council for the first time?
Today.
So the last review that we had, the workshop.
The final workshop was the 23rd of February. I would just need to check with my project team whether any of the boundaries presented at that workshop were different from any previous. Allow me to do that.
So at the final workshop...
Excuse me, do you mind if I just... I also won't be able to answer your previous...
Yeah, cool.
So the... So the boundaries in the report today were presented at the last two workshops. The final workshop was a summing up.
Right, that's as I understood it. So why has the Linwood one changed? Why have you changed the boundary to Allwynds Road when that was never raised with me? Right, because the feedback we'd given previously and the one on the 9th of February showed really clearly the changes, and now on this one you've got a completely different boundary.
Allow us to double check that and we'll come back to you.
Right, and then the other thing is there's a number of the Wolston in the columns. You've got Wolston referred to 3 times in 3 different wards for the same area. So you've got Wolston South, Wolston East, Wolston West.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just a typing error or something, but...
No, they possibly they're different communities of interest. Sorry, Amy, could you?
So the way that statistical areas work, they don't necessarily align with what we would expect to see for our communities, and because Christchurch doesn't have many official suburb boundaries, it's really difficult to define those areas. So every single spatial data set that you come across is going to have it in a different place with a different name. So those might not match up exactly with what you would expect to see, but they are what we have to have in there. And
Right.
Stats NZ SA2 boundaries.
Okay, so here was the presentation we got on the 24th of February. So that's, as I understood it, the
Yanni,
yellow,
I think John's said that he's just going to get some additional advice on that.
Ashley's just gone upstairs to double check the maps.
No, just here.
So, could we move
Oh,
on?
up
and-
some steps, you mean?
Could we possibly, no, he's, there's somebody that's gone upstairs.
Yeah.
So could we move on and come
yes.
back to that answer?
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Were there any other questions? It appears to be the end of questions. So, I mean, I'm sure that we can, I mean, I'm a little bit unclear as to what that means in terms of proceeding to the debate.
To that question, Councillor Johansson, change your vote.
you've changed like a massive part of the Linwood ward that everything up until now has given the impression that it was completely different.
We haven't made any changes between.
You've put the boundary down Aldwyn's Road when it was in the diagrams, it looked like it was going
It's a massive change.
Chewham and Harrow. So you've taken Phillipstown and Charleston out of Linwood. No, it hasn't.
The officer's sure that the change hasn't been made since the last workshop.
Yeah.
So,
There was a whole bunch of changes made between.
It would be pretty
Workshop.
I was
substantial.
told that that feedback had
It
been
would be pretty
incorporated in,
substantial to take
and us.
Phillipstown out
Yeah.
of the Linwood ward
and Charleston as well.
and Charleston.
That has not been made since the last workshop on the 23rd, but it was made prior to
I
that.
raised the feedback because initially you took Phillipstown and put it into Central, and feedback was given that that should stay the same.
And then we had to ensure that the Preston's ward, Preston's area was kept within a single ward, so that change had to be made to accommodate keeping Preston's within Burwood in a single ward, so
Why? Linwood's only 2%.
but that was made before the 23rd.
It's
What
not clear from
we're
the map at all.
unequivocally saying is
It's a joke.
the ward maps presented at the summary that was asked for on the 23rd are the maps in the initial proposal. We're just getting the absolute iterations of the map so we can prove that.
No, I get that. So what I thought was that the boundary with the black line was the ward, right? So the black line's the ward, and this was the feedback that you'd had, and you'd changed it.
Look,
Not the other way around.
I'm not going to have any more of this, so Anne, you've got a question?
Clarify that
What's a
through the
single
submission process, isn't that the sort of feedback that we
Exactly.
would get?
So-
And that's why we have the submission process. So then we have the hearings, and then if there's enough support for that,
And
then that's what happens.
I mean, this is, excuse me, Yanni, it is clear that this particular change was misinterpreted by Councillor Johansson, and as a result, this has been a surprise to him. But he's had these papers for as long as everyone else has had them, and this is the first that I was aware that this was a concern. So it does make it very difficult when people don't notify in advance that issues of substance are being raised. At the end of the day, this is an issue that can be dealt with in the hearings process, and I'm sure that both that the community board and members of the Phillipstown community and Charleston community will be very alert to this and will be very clear about where they believe their communities of interest lie. So I'm not going to predetermine it here. It's a matter that went through a particular process, but we are at the beginning of the legal process now, and that means that we are not putting out a proposal that is going to be the final proposal. We are putting out an initial proposal. We will be calling for submissions. As I said before, the last time we went out to with an initial proposal in 2015, when we went out with an initial proposal in that year, the final proposal was very different from the one that went out. So, and that's actually a good thing to know that substantial changes can be made, so Yanni's concerns can be addressed. His communities may not feel the same way, and we have to allow the process to proceed. So that's the end of the questions.
Maybe questions from two members that have come in.
We've got, I don't know, I'll just catch you up. So essentially we've got an amendment on the table which will allow for a debate around electing at large across the wider community board area, and that's Councillor Davidson, and then we've got a foreshadowed motion. If the substantive motion fails, then there is a foreshadowed motion for the reduction and the four-way. Yeah, and the advice that we've had is that the only difference is that that amendment would take a lot longer to come back to council for signing off, but we have got till the 9th of September or whatever the date is in order to put up the initial proposal. But we don't really want to push it out that far because this will excite a large number of submissions. Positive about that now, which is a good thing, and as a result we need time to make a final decision and then to allow for the objections process to take it through to the Local Government Commission if necessary.
Okay, well
Yep.
Thanks for that update. That was going to be my question, where are we at?
Yep.
And apologies for our absence,
okay.
but we've been in our current wards and got really good news for you later.
Excellent. I was hoping you'd come back with good news. Good. So we've got a motion on the table, and would you like to move your amendment? And so we'll formally move the amendment. And who's seconding that amendment? Sarah Templeton. And we have a foreshadowed motion, and we can have the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Goff seconded Sam McDonald. Right, good. Okay, let the debate begin.
And just to be clear, we're just having one debate and we can talk on the amendment, foreshadowed motion, substantive, what you like. Cool, easy.
Sorry, well, I'll kick off the debate since I've moved it pro forma. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge staff having gone through what is a very significant process to get to this point. And as I said before, this is the start of the process, which is where we go out and engage with the wider community. Whatever decision we make today, we're at the beginning of that process, which is to formulate an initial proposal. We're under relatively strict requirements of the legislation in terms of effective and fair representation, and fair representation is determined by a plus or minus percentage of 10% around the average size of the areas that are being represented. The exception to this in the past has been, and the proposal is that we maintain that in the Akaroa, Banks Peninsula ward being a separate ward. But all of the debate around the foreshadowed motion has actually guaranteed that this in itself will be a major source of submissions into the process as they return for the third time to battle for the retention of what was their old district boundaries. There was an agreement reached so that Christchurch City would basically subsume the Banks Peninsula District Council. It was something that was voted for by the Banks Peninsula residents, but voted against by the Christchurch City residents. So Christchurch didn't want to have Banks Peninsula. They called it a shotgun wedding, but essentially it was the two were merged, and undertakings were made at that time about the representation that would continue to exist. We did have to fight for the representation last time in front of the Local Government Commission as well, but as I said, the recommendation changed. All of the recommendations that we put out in the initial proposal are subject and open for discussion and genuine feedback. We made substantial changes the last time this happened. So I welcome the debate. I think it's really important, and I look forward to hearing how people want to approach this in hopefully a way that enables people to feel that they have something to contribute, something to say, and that they will be listened to. Anne.
Thank you. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendations. I think this is about fair and effective representation for individuals and communities, and these recommendations, I believe, will best ensure this fair and equitable representation. The changes in the ward boundaries reflect how communities affiliate and with neighbouring wards and form larger communities of interest. And I look forward to the involvement of our communities in this discussion through their submissions and being involved in the hearings panel and the discussions that come from that.
Aaron.
I'll raise a couple of points, but I'll start by, before I do, saying that I'm actually going to listen to the debate here from my fellow councillors before I actually make up my mind. And I say that because for many elections now, the voter turnout in Christchurch hasn't been that great. Is the system we've got doing that well? Is it engaging enough people? So essentially we're a elected minority running the city, not the majority. More than 50% of people didn't vote. So we hardly even have a mandate, but we're here. It would be interesting to look at the system that James is proposing. I personally wish we were going up with two proposals so the public had two different cats to look at and go, you know what, I want to put my money on that one or on that one, but that's not the system we work in. That's a conversation with the government, with all the other conversations with the government, which brings me to my other point in the term that you sometimes hear when you suggest radical change is the drain the swamp. A great president once said that. Not the one that's springing to mind for everyone. It was Ronald Reagan, 1983, was the first politician to use the term. And it refers to Washington, D.C. because it's built on a swamp and you drain it to get rid of all the mosquitoes. And Christchurch built on a swamp as well. And so when people say drain the swamp in Christchurch, it's an interesting term to use because geographically we're very similar. I wish we were proposing both, and today I will listen to the debate of everyone and see where that gets us. Christchurch doesn't have oysters though, so that's a geographical difference.
Sarah.
Kia ora. We have work to do on representation, diversity and inclusion. In Ototahi Christchurch, in the lead up to the March 15th anniversary, we should be looking at taking clear steps to enable the wide range of people in our city to take up the opportunity to help shape the city. In 2015, there was a strong desire to address this, and in 2016, for all the right reasons, we moved to single councillor wards. However, the impacts were not as expected. We have had fewer candidates standing and fewer women elected. We don't hold statistics for other measures of diversity, but we should. In 2016, we had 4 councillors elected unopposed in New Zealand's second largest city, and in 2019, only 7 of 46 candidates for council were women. We need to do better. Single councillor wards favour the incumbent, so I can see why my colleagues might be wary of change and more competition. But I, for one, would rather have more people were willing to stand and felt like they had a shot. Having more candidates also encourages more people to vote. They have more choice and they see that they have more influence on how council is made up. Single councillor wards have also led to patch protection and a loss of wider perspective on the city. They have clearly not met the Local Government Commission guidance that our electoral system should encourage participation, such as voting or standing as a candidate. One thing that we could do to address the diversity, inclusion and participation in patch protection would be to go back to having councillors elected at large across community board areas, though with community board members still elected in smaller wards for the grassroots local connections, keeping what worked from the last change but changing the one thing that didn't. voters would have the freedom to choose and hold to account 3 councillors, not just the one that they do now. And they would be more likely to have at least one councillor that shares their values and priorities, and that 3 councillors could work together across the board area. It would also encourage more people to stand. With 3 seats up for grabs, there is less of a barrier, and the statistics bear this out. In the 4 elections prior to the 2016, we had an average of 3.9 candidates per seat and 48% women councillors around the table. And since the 2016 change, we have had an average of 2.6 candidates per seat and only 20% of female councillors. Single councillor wards are anti-democratic, and we're not proposing to even try and help. The Local Government Commission is clear that multi-member wards provide greater choice for voters, and following the election provide greater choice for residents on who to approach on local issues, and allow sharing and specialising in responsibilities between councillors. I'd encourage my colleagues to vote in favour of Councillor Davidson's amendment, and I'd encourage people to submit if they want more choice and better engaged and more available representation. Kia ora.
Pauline.
When we began this process, I think we were all totally aware of the amount of stuff that's going on in our city and in the country generally, notwithstanding an LTP year as well, on top of our COVID stuff as well. So we decided, and I think we all agreed, that just a tweak at this point would be the best option. But within that, we decided to equalise the community boards so that they were all 3 ward boards. And we had to do that to equalise pay parity. And so as a result of that, it's become a little bit bigger than we first anticipated. I won't be supporting the amendment. I'll be supporting the original staff recommendation that we have today after 15 workshops where we thought we were all working well together and achieving a unified stance to put out. This is all surprising to me at the last minute. I'm very wary of having members elected at large, because I know I've experienced when I was in a double ward when at one stage I was the only one out of 7 representing my area and the rest were all from the other ward. And those were incumbents who were favoured and repeatedly elected. So I don't support being elected at large at all. I think it's a very dangerous situation, and it does end up with some people not having any representation at all in their local area. So I'd be very, very careful of that one. So I'm not going to say much more today, except I urge you to be careful of the amendment and support the staff recommendation that we have worked so hard together on, to go out for consultation and let's hear back from the people.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Look, I don't need to speak for too long on this, other than to say that it'll be no surprise I'm obviously supporting James Goff's foreshadowed proposal. And I think you do it for a couple of reasons. You know, firstly, it sends a real signal to the city that actually we're prepared to make change as well. In the end, if we can be far more effective and far more efficient, I think that can only be a good thing for the city. Certainly the thing that stood out to me, as everyone would probably expect, is the cost savings that come with it as well. You know, $3 million a year conservatively, without even looking at those additional flow-on costs. And if you look through it, you know, reducing 8 councillors saves us $920,000 a year. Reducing 17 community board members is another $340,000 a year. And losing 3 community boards would save us another 1.7. And I can see people shaking their heads and go, "Oh no, they'll put the remuneration up." Well, go and have a look at Auckland. You know, if you have a look at that, the per capita up there, they represent 70,000 each. So it's certainly not anything like that. I think the key thing, though, is that if you have effective councillors for different areas, you actually empower your local community boards as well. So I'm really surprised that people aren't keen to see some drastic change. I think it would send a real signal to the city, allow the staff here to actually get on and do their job and not sit in meetings with us all day over thousands and thousands of questions. And I think, you know, finally, the challenge really would be that in the end, if you know, I think we should really look for more competition. It wouldn't hurt some of us to go back out into the real world, and so I'd certainly hope that you would, you know, be pleased to progress the foreshadowed motion.
Anyone else? Andrew?
Thank you. Unsurprisingly, I favour the initial programme in the report. It keeps democracy as close to the community as possible. It increases the opportunity for people to elect someone that they might actually know and that might actually genuinely know their community. And it holds their elected member clearly accountable to the local people that elected them. Our city's got many communities of interest. The diversity of the communities of interest requires a diversity of representation that reflects those different communities. And in my view, the only way that we achieve that is by electing community board members and councillors by ward, each ward having its own particular needs and issues. And I would suggest we do that rather than any concept of electing at large, whether that's over the whole city, whether it's over a quarter of the city, or whether it's by a large over an area 3 times the size of the current wards. The size of the ward influences the kind of people who stand for election. Running for election in a larger ward inevitably requires greater resources, more time, more money. That in itself limits the number of people that are able to do so, limits the ability of genuine grassroots community people to stand for election, limits the opportunity for real community knowledge, real community connection, and also limits that diversity in representation that we're talking about. Any at-large model by design advantages those with greater name recognition and greater resources and disadvantages everybody else. So the GOF proposal would halve the number of councillors, and it deliberately advantages the well-resourced and the well-known for the reasons that I've just described. It therefore then concentrates power into a smaller and likely less diverse group of people, and interestingly, and this is particularly notable, concentrates and distributes the existing remuneration pool of about $1.7 million across that smaller group of councillors, so has the effect of doubling the remuneration of that smaller number of people to over $200,000 per annum. Half the councillors, half the remuneration, twice the pay. I don't see the saving in that. And I can't see how that could be better for Christchurch, how it could be better for representation, or could be better for anybody other than those well-resourced and well-known people who would benefit from this particular model. It seems it started with a claim of a bloated council, but on closer inspection it seems that the only bloating here would be the salaries and the pockets of this smaller resulting number of councillors. I also don't know how the claimed $3 million saving in the proposal has been arrived at. If it's arrived at by removing a number of community boards or losing a number of community boards, as has been said, I don't think that really is in the spirit of effective representation, and it worries me that that might be a wider end of the narrow end of a wider wedge that might see community boards gone altogether at some point.
Thank you. James.
Thanks. I'll just really speak to the foreshadowed motion. It's quite simple, and that's what I think is the attractive idea around it. City split into 4 quadrants or wards with Cathedral Square as the centre point, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. Pretty easy to understand. 2 councillors elected in each ward, 5 community board members in each ward. The broad geographic lines take into account of the 10% plus or minus population variance. Mayors elected at large, and the community boards are made up of 7 in total, with obviously 2 appointed councillors from those respective wards. You know, I'd like to see this proposal truly empower the community boards, and I don't think that has happened actually ever since 1989. And that would be by allocating the LTP on local projects in the capital program, delegating it to the community board to prioritise within their own ward. And if they deem it a priority, they can bring things forward. But equally, they would then need to decide what goes back. And I think that that would be, you know, a real step forward in empowering community boards, and we could do that with a proposal such as this. So for me, all of this is about striking the balance between good representation but equally good governance. If you have many elected members, it's very good for representation, but it's not so good for efficiency or making good decisions. If you have very few elected members, it's great for efficiency, keeping things focused, and you get far better collective decision making, but it's not so great for representation. I feel that the balance, thank you, Pauline, I feel that this gets the balance right. It enables a council of 9 to bring city-wide strategic elements together in the best interests of Christchurch as a whole, and each community board of 7 to effectively deal with the local issues at a local level and make meaningful decisions in their own right. You know, each community board member would represent around 13 or so thousand people in their ward. So by no means is that a number unreasonably, you know, manageable or out of sync with other metropolitan centres. I don't believe that it would be harder for good people to get elected, Admittedly, it makes it harder for people around this table to be elected because there's fewer seats, higher competition, but that's the point. It's the entire point of this, and I see this as a good thing. Good candidates will do just fine. Big election expenditure consistently doesn't translate into big votes, but performance generally does. And right off the bat, the structure saves around $3 million per year in salaries and admin costs alone. Where are they? Where do you find that? In our own budget, in the 2021 financial budget. So remember as well, this is operational. So $5 million equates to about 1% in rates. So it's not an insignificant figure. And as for the REM Authority and higher salaries, you know, the REM Authority looks beyond just numbers. Look at history. We added more councillors at the last rep review, 13 to 16. Did salaries go down then? No, they went up, actually. And you're actually breaching the Act if you bring remuneration into this decision, as the Act clearly stipulates that you need to focus on the representation elements of it and not remuneration. So even going there is clearly in breach of the Act. And I'll touch on two final aspects of the proposal if I can.
That's all, sorry.
Is that all she wrote?
Yeah. That's all she wrote.
All right, well, I'll go for it next time. You can read about it.
However, I did find out that they switched off my timer at 3 minutes. Yeah, but the beginning of the debate it's 5. So I'm just going to take the other 2 minutes just to clarify a couple of things. Just the one thing I did want to clarify is the question of remuneration. So you might recall that the Remuneration Authority has reinstated the pools. So the pools disappeared, the remuneration pool, which says that X number of councillors, you divide the pool by the number of councillors. There's one exception here, and that is the Deputy Mayor is paid an additional part of the remuneration pool in order to cater for the fact that they are the person that stands in when the Mayor isn't available. So there is that's the requirements under the legislation. So the truth is that essentially, if you halve the number of councillors, they will get double the pay. So let's be honest about that and just put it out there.
Could we be honest about or legal advice whether or not we're actually allowed to bring remuneration? I'm calling a point of order myself, actually, Sarah. If you're allowed to bring remuneration into our decision making on the representation review.
No, you brought it in, and so we were clarifying.
Can I speak to the point
Well, I want some
order?
clarity then on it, because I don't believe it can form decision making.
We're getting some advice from but I'd like to speak to the point of order, which was I was simply clarifying what people were talking about would be the result of a decision. I wasn't talking about it being anything that should influence the decision. In fact, you're not allowed to be influenced by that measure.
But for someone that acts on advice, have you got advice that says it will double?
Sorry?
For someone that acts on advice, have you got...
We're not here to debate this. A point of order has been raised.
Is the point of order that you've been misrepresented or what you've said? No. Well,
James Goff has raised a point of order on my comments which relate to the effect of the remuneration pool. And I'm not saying that we should take the remuneration impact into account, but I thought that it was important that the remuneration impact were clarified.
And I want clarity on, if I may, on whether impact of remuneration is allowed to be factored by members as they make a decision on the representation review.
No, but I'm not suggesting that for a minute.
But neither
Members,
is it ruled out.
Can we
get back to the point?
Mix.
do you mind if we can actually get the advice and then you can take it from there?
Talking about remuneration isn't prevented, it's not barred within this debate. If you want to refer to remuneration as part of your discussion on numbers, number of councillors, number of representatives, if you want to refer to remuneration, I don't see anything that says you can't.
Could I just clarify? I'm not trying to contradict the legal advice, but the legal advice is correct. There's nothing to stop you discussing it, but it is not a factor that is in consideration for the rationale for the proposal. And so that's why you will not see it featured in the proposal that the team have put up. and so it's not one of the rationales
Yep.
you would make.
And
But I've seen the
basis on,
argument
but
about
discussing it.
reducing the council
Thank you.
being the
So
main
what the point that I
rationale,
was
which is just not
making
true.
when I was speaking was simply this, that a reference was made to the reality that remuneration packages weren't altered by the Remuneration Authority when the number of councillors increased at the last remuneration review. There wasn't a pool operating in that year. There is a pool operating again now, and that means that the pool is divided equally with exceptions, and the exception is any higher rate that's paid to an individual member of the council, and in this case it is just the deputy mayor who is in that category. So I was just simply clarifying what the situation was. There's no such thing as a point of clarification.
Are we able to take into account, through you, Chair, we please clarify then that we're not allowed to take into account the potential savings when we're looking at representation?
No, you're not allowed to take remuneration into account. So I'm sorry, the
Savings
benefits
of
of
remuneration.
remuneration go to the individual councillors. In that regard, we would be conflicted, all of us. So we aren't allowed to take it into account in our decision making. That
It
was
is
the
not a
advice that
factor.
we've received.
Yes.
It's the advice that we've operated on, and I was simply responding to a comment that was made that could have been misinterpreted, and I felt that it really deserved to be clarified.
Thank you.
I should have just finished my debate
Crystal
on that.
clear.
John.
Now, the last thing that I wanted to yes, please. The last thing that I wanted to say in my remaining minute is that I am going to support the amendment. And the reason I'm going to support the amendment is that I wanted very much for the issues that Pauline Cotter raised actually to be addressed. And I was a supporter of changing it to the individual wards. I've changed my mind because the implications for encouraging people to stand was not an intended consequence, it's an unintended consequence. And I think sometimes when unintended consequences occur, there is always an opportunity to review them. I'd rather that our initial proposal went out with the idea that we are changing from individual wards to across the community board area. I'd rather we went out with that and invite people to submit on that basis rather than the other way around. Thank you. Melanie.
Today has been, I haven't really written anything down because I'm surprised by today. We have gone through all these workshops, we've gone through community boards, and we have got to this place where we're at, to something that's similar to what we have today, and where there's a few tweaks on boundaries. It does break up the Linwood Central Healthcare Board, and now we're talking about completely different things that I had no expectation of a week ago, let alone maybe even the beginning of this week. And now we're talking about something completely different, and the community boards have had no input. And if we put through either the amendment or the foreshadowed motion, there's been no community board input into it, and we're just expecting them to come back during the submission process. And I just can not understand that one bit. And back to what I was going to talk about to start with, is that it is important that we have small wards, in my opinion, because it means that each councillor is responsible for their area, they should be accessible, and people should be able to go to them and they should know about their local issues. And if we don't do a good job, well, we get not elected the next time. And that's how it is. If you've got, it's very, like everyone said before, if you have an elected at large in the Spraden Cashmere kind of area, you get two people from Cashmere. It's what we used to have, and the whole, areas are just left unrepresented, as particularly the lower socioeconomic areas, and it's really important that we represent those and that we are a diverse group of people. You can't get that when you're voting for at large in community board areas. It just is not possible. And if you're a new candidate, if you wanted to run individually, you could not do that on a community board wide basis, because it's just prohibitive to anybody new coming in. It's disgusting to even think about it, in my opinion.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually really disappointed by today. I really am by my colleagues. We've worked really hard, listened to a lot of information. I was elected unknown politically because I was known in my community. That is why I got elected into a community board. I was also elected unopposed because I worked bloody hard, like a lot of other people around this table. And now we're sitting there going, oh, we won't have individual ward representation. I actually think it's really important. I think you've got to stand up and be counted in front of those meetings that are really hard. I'm the only councillor, I believe, that went and visited most of those families that were affected in flooding, that had their homes either taken because of the flooding, and we had doctors' certificates, etc., and were in tears. I went with staff. That's because I am a ward councillor, and I believe that is why I got re-elected, because I do the hard yards. I've been listening to this table, and I think some of you have actually forgotten about what we're really doing this for. Anyone in this country can stand for elected office. I left school illiterate. Look where I am. So, you know, I listen to all of this, and, you know, the real world, I know the real world really well, and that's why I can represent all aspects of my community, and I'm really proud to, and I will be supporting Stinker.
Jimmy.
Because this is not a kind of the game theory, zero-sum game theory. Two options have the advantage, have a setback. The advantage in large one looks like electors have a greater choice, like the Melody mentioned earlier, great choice, flexibility in elections. Also, residents have a large number of councillors to approach with their concerns. But the setback is because while the campaign, is a big area, probably need to spend much time and more the cost. But to the rich people, maybe, not too difficult. But to the poor people, maybe it's difficult. Spend much time. Even we have the kind of series hall, this one. But the other one is the kind of the take into account who is your the kind of local councillor. But in large one, we have 3 councillors, all local councillors. But who is truly, to be engaged, accountable? Is still need to consider. This morning you can see my picture there. I'm the council of Hornby. If we have 3, who on behalf of council of Hornby? This we also need to consider this. We think about it. Even now, our local MP, big area, but each electorate is only 1 MP, rather than just 3 MP, etc. So this is my concern. Consider the campaign, particular small areas still can give the people easier, is high quality one, can make it happen. But I'm the disappointed is still regarding the boundary of the community board, each boundary, because even we have 15 times particular emphasis, we change this one, we consider that one feedback, but who knows, this, I still don't know, that's not fully, truly open, transparent. This is my particular concern. I just not agree with the draft, the boundary. But regarding the small one, bigger one, probably compare the advantage feedback, I still prefer the small one.
Anyone else? Mike? Oh, sorry, James.
Thank you.
Mike, sorry. And you've got 5 minutes, I think. Is that right? Yep.
Oh, I'll go last. Yeah. I'll go. Okay, not a problem. I guess firstly I want to respond to some of the comments from councillors that appear a little bit angry about how this debate is shaped up. Look, I've raised numerous times throughout a number of workshops what I believe is actually better and fair representation, and I also like to acknowledge Councillor Goff has also done that at times as well. I also signalled at the last workshop that I would be raising an amendment, so it's actually disappointing to hear some of those comments directed at us today. my amendment actually, what it does, it only affects councillors. And if this process through the consultation process and was adopted, we would all still be ward councillors. With the initial proposal, I still support status quo of the community board members being elected at a geographically smaller local level at the grassroots. And I support the initial proposal of having all the community boards being of similar size and makeup. And I support the proposal of Banks Peninsula retaining being an isolated community. I'd also like to acknowledge all the work that has been done. I believe my amendment, although it will need a little bit of tweaking, is only minor tweaking. It won't actually affect the ward boundaries. I do personally have some concerns about the impact on Redwood, but I'm actually happy to go listen to that community on what they think about it themselves. But for a number of reasons, I believe that councillors should be elected across their community board area. So one thing to make clear is this amendment, it does not change the total number of councillors, it doesn't change the population per member and the work already done on boundaries. It does, however, actually allow for a few important factors that will, I believe, create better and fair representation and encourage people to participate in the election. This amendment provides greater choice for voters. After the election, if residents will have more choice on who to approach for local issues, meaning it's more likely for at least one of the locally elected councillors share the views and values of a local residents, and this will actually help improve public engagement. It will allow local councillors to share and work together on local issues while at the same time being still accountable to the people who have elected them. It will spread skill sets of different councillors over a large number of residents. It will encourage people to stand. A number of good people decide not to stand because they see no point running against an incumbent when there's only one position. This in turn may lead to more diversity around the table, both through thought and people diversity. The data across a number of elections show that the average money spent on an election campaign between small and large wards is minimal, and often candidates who spend the most do not get elected. And for those who believe fewer councillor is the way to go, then this would be a lot easier to get to that outcome through the consultation process than actually if we elected to consult on status quo. And finally, I think importantly, the majority of people surveyed did not support retaining status quo of single councillor wards. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Kia ora. Look, I'm glad I wasn't here for the questions because Councillor Major and I were being productive in our joint wards. But here we are with this on our table, and I'm surprised and disappointed, and I accept what Councillor Davidson just said about raising it at previous workshops, but it's hard to remember what happened because we've had so many workshops on this, 15 according to Councillor Cotter, and we've been out to our staff have been out to community boards, as Councillor Coker has mentioned, and so I think that we have traversed the various options on this representation review. So, as I say, I was surprised and disappointed that we have the amendments and the foreshadowed motion. So that's ironic and rich coming from someone who, speaking of money spent on campaigns, who spent just a little less than Councillor Major, and so being well-resourced and having good name recognition is one of the reasons that I'm here, and it worries me that that's how it could end up. And you should be worried that I'm here as well. But I take the, you know, I know I have jokes and laughs and things, but you know, I do take the role really seriously. It's a privilege, it's a responsibility, and I think that we've thrashed this out, and the staff's, I don't agree with the staff's recommendations, but I support them.
Thank you. Yanni.
Yeah, just as a councillor who used to represent an area that was known as Hagley Ferrymaid and looked at the voter turnout statistics, what was really interesting to me was that the Ferrymaid side had a voter turnout of about 65%, and the Hagley side, which is the kind of inner city east, Linwood, central city area had a 35% voter turnout. If you don't think that's going to make a difference in an election, if you go to at large, then I just can't comprehend that. The reality is that when that happened to the city, when we went from smaller local wards to bigger wards that took in multiple wards and had multiple candidates elected across them, so we went from 24 to 12, and they were still across those bigger wards, you saw quite clearly that the wealthier areas tended to get better representation. So I just think the point that Councillor Coker made should not be lost on anyone. So I do support the idea of local representation, but I mean, I guess I'm in the view, similar agreement with Councillor Daniels. There's been a lot of work done on this. I'm not happy with everything in it. It's a proposal that's getting put out, and let's get it out and let's hear what the people have to say. I think at this late stage, to come up with a new proposal is not really the right thing to do. Otherwise, I'd start moving amendments on all sorts of things, but I'm not going to. I just wanted to make two other comments, which is I'm really sad that the proposal has been to get rid of the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board. I don't feel that we've really thought about the options through the process, and so obviously we'll wait and see what the feedback is on that. But that is a thing that I don't see the need to get rid of that community board in its entirety. I understand that there may be needed some changes around which wards make up that community board. And the other thing is there are some quite significant changes that I'm disappointed have not been brought to our attention in any substantial way, particularly for the ward that I represent. But again, I'm happy to hear what the community have to say and go through that process rather than make the amendments today.
Is that everyone? Look, thank you very much. I'm actually thrilled with the way the debate's gone. That was a high quality debate. It was, and that was because people actually talk passionately about what it's all about and what drives them, what motivates them, and yes, what gets them re-elected, which is that very direct, upfront and personal connection to their residents. And the way that people conducted that debate, I thought was exemplary. So I'm actually going to thank Councillor Davidson and Councillor Goff for putting other items on the agenda. I don't think that the amendment will pass, but I am going to vote for it simply because I do believe that it would be a very good way of drawing people into the process. The substituted amendment, the foreshadowed motion, that particular one has guaranteed that Akaroa will flood the process with submissions, as they have done before. But my final point is this, and it's really to pick up on Yanni's point, that things will change in the process that we now enter into. And the reason that it will change, and I want to use the example of Akaroa, in 2015, we proposed a Sumner Banks Peninsula ward. That's why there were so many representations from them. That's why we made the changes to the wards that we had gone out and proposed, and that's why the final proposal was able to, withstand the challenge that was made in front of the Local Government Commission. So we're on a journey, and hopefully I will now put the motion, and I'm going to put the amendment first. So those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That is lost.
That was close.
Well and truly.
Didn't sound like it was.
Now we move to the substantive motion, and I'll put that motion.
Can you just be clear, sorry Leanne, just that by vote, if you like the foreshadowed motion, you would vote against the substantive?
Correct.
Just for anyone that...
Yeah. Just repeat.
So for you, Pauline...
He has a foreshadowed motion. So the motion is to go out with the initial proposal that we've workshopped. So that's the vote on the table. And what James is saying is that if people would prefer to vote for the foreshadowed motion, then they would vote no to this one. Yeah.
I thought you said vote yes.
No. No. All right, so we're all clear. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
Just record it, so hands up for no. So Mike, James, Catherine.
Oh, hang on.
It was your debate, so.
Phil and
Actually, I'm just against 1C.
Just 1C for Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
So maybe Mike and Yanni, I think, have got specific ones that they might then.
Yeah, I
pick
wanted
out.
mine recorded against the community board.
yeah, that's right, the community
Okay.
board. So there's a community board resolution as well.
Could I ask that we just take a division on that? Then 'Cause I want to.
Yeah, we've
Well,
got.
Shall I read out
Is
what
it-
I've got?
Yeah.
Is it too hard? I don't want to.
Councillor Davidson against 1C. Councillor Goff to McDonald, Major and Kieran against the full
You guys just taking names. Thank you.
and Councillor Johansson against the resolutions regarding the community board.
IJ and K.
And we
Yeah.
can record that.
IJK. Yeah, okay.
That's fine. Thank you very
Right,
much.
so I declare the, the,
L.
what? I declare that carried.